This is a brand new Vielo V+1 all-road gravel bike from a small British bike company that launched with the original V+1 back in 2018. And in this video, I'm going to take you through all the changes on this new bike and go for a ride on my local trails. They see what it's all about, they see how fast it is, and they see how capable this new bike is. And as you can probably tell today, it's chuffing freezing. So if you need some nice clothing to keep you warm and dry this winter, then check out the sportful clothing I'm wearing right now at the links in the description down below. Okay, let's dive in. What's really nice about Vielo is that unlike bigger bike companies, they don't do model years. So wrapping your head around their range and the models is much easier. So this is a V+1 and it's essentially a single gravel all-road bike in the range. But there are two versions available, different carbon fiber grades. So a lighter weight version, which is cheaper and more affordable, or a lighter weight carbon version using higher grade carbon with a higher price tag as well, which this one is here. And then there's a range of builds and you can basically customize the bike to your every whim and fancy. You get a frame set for £3,200 and build it yourself with new parts or old parts you have lying around. And the range starts for a complete bike with Shimano GRX at £4,400, which is pretty decent actually, and compares well to that giant Revolt with GRX that I reviewed a little while ago. This bike though is the ultimate bike with the ultimate price tag. It costs £9,999 and we have all the top end kit you could really ask for on this bike. So SRAM red with a new Explore gearing with a 1044 cassette on the back, carbon fiber cranks, brake levers, and then Zip 303S carbon fiber wheels, WTB Riddler tyres and a 45mm width, and the company's own one-piece carbon handlebar and stem and matching carbon seat post with a fabric saddle and matching bar tape. This size medium without pedals weighs 8.2 kilograms on my scales, so pretty decent weight. And now let's get on to how the bike looks. And personally, I love the way the bike looks. And there's two things for me. There's the pastel shades they use, which I think look really, really refreshing in a market awash with fairly basic primary colors, although some brands do stand out. So the colors work for me. And then there's a really understated minimal branding. No logos on the down tube, no garish branding, just a very understated logo on the top tube, the head tube, and the Union flag on the back of the seat tube there. So very clean, very minimal, very subtle. And then underneath that paint, you have a very nice looking carbon frame and fork as well. No drop rear stays. Quite a bit of profiling and shaping going on with the carbon tubes here and there, but nothing that, until you get up close, looks really outlandish. So a very conservative looking frame perhaps, but when you get up close, you can start to really appreciate the details on this British design bike. The biggest story with the Vielo V+1 when it launched back in 2018, and then the R+1 road bike that followed it, and really something the brand is passionate about, is a complete focus on one-by drivetrains. And that is, to be clear, a single chainring on the front and no front mech. As many of you know, this is a trend that comes from mountain biking and then cyclocross and gravel, and we're now seeing it on road bikes as well. And it's definitely getting better in terms of the group set availability. This new SRAM Explore gearing, 12-speed cassette makes it much better, and then we have Campag's XR13, which makes it even better still. And Shimano are sort of keeping up with GRX, but definitely room for improvement. But generally, the choice of going one by and ditching the front mech is getting easier and easier all the time with group set developments, and then brands like Vielo really embracing one by for the benefits it brings. And those benefits are the frame can be optimized around the down tube, the bottom bracket and the chain stays to make use of the fact you don't have to accommodate a front mech. So more space, more tire clearance, more stiffness and lower weight, so lots of wins. And if you're not a fan of one by and you want to fit a front mech, well, I'm sorry, but you can't fit a front mech on this bike. And it joins a very, very small crew of one by only bikes the likes of white here in the UK and the new, well, not so new, open wide. But most bikes on the market are still accommodating 2x front mechs as well. And that really reflects a sort of sitting on the fence approach to try and keep as many people happy as possible. Those who want 1x and those who want 2x. But Vielo, being a small brand, designing a bike for the way they ride and the way they want their bike to look and be appreciated, it's a 1x only bike. And I really admire that commitment to 1x because, as many of you know, I really enjoy 1x, the benefits it brings, and for me, there's really no downsides. So see a small brand like Vielo really kind of putting their flag in the ground as a 1x supporter, I think it's a really smart move. A risky move perhaps, because they might alienate quite a few 2x potential customers, but that's the move they're taking. And if you want to know more about why the bike is 1x, it's definitely worth watching my recent video with Ian Hughes, the founder of Vielo, where we sat down and had a chat about this new bike, the changes, and more the backstory of the brand, the bike, and 1x in particular. That's linked down below if you want to watch it. It's definitely worth an hour of your time, also available as a podcast as well. So 1x carries on from the original V+1, and visually the bike looks very similar to that original bike, but there are quite a few key changes just to bring it into line with where gravel is going these days. The biggest one is tyre clearance. So the old bike was pegged at a 42mm tyre. This new one goes up to a 50mm tyre, and you go 700C like we have here, or 650B if you prefer. So plenty of space around these 45mm wide tyres, lots of mud clearance, so that's a nice thing to see. And thankfully we still have mudguard mounts, and that really shows the British design of the bike. So a bike you can use all year round with mudguards or without, whatever you fancy. The other big change to the bike is the geometry, but why don't we go for a ride, see how it performs and rides, and then talk more about that geometry. Righty-ho, let's get out on the trail and see what the new V+1 is all about. And straight away you can feel the changes to the geometry of this new bike over the old bike. And it's longer, slacker and lower than the old bike. And that's a trend in the gravel bike market at the moment. A big hefty influence from the mountain bike world. The geometry numbers are fairly similar to the Specialized Diverge, which is one of my favourite bikes. And the handling, therefore, is quite similar to that bike. And that's to say, it's a very calm, steady, planted bike. It feels really rock solid at high speed, on loose surfaces, has a really planted, secure feeling. Doesn't have the flighty, edgy handling that some bikes have. The steering isn't as lively as that giant Revolt I reviewed a few weeks ago. Much calmer, much easier to ride bike. And if you like to ride fast over all surfaces, you'll definitely like that handling characteristic it offers. I've been really impressed with the speed of this bike. So stiff carbon frame, low overall weight, fast wheels, and these tyres, these 45mm tyres, even though I'm running them low pressure, really super low, there's no slouch on the road. You can barrel along at 35, 40k an hour quite easily. And when you get onto gravel, you can maintain that speed pretty well. So for a fast A to B, point to point gravel racing bike, or just a bike that you know can be fast on the road and won't compromise your on-road speed too much, it's definitely up there with some of the fastest bikes. The other detailed change I appreciate in the geometry updates are the lower bottom bracket. It's 70mm, so not as low as the 80mm of the more progressive gravel bikes out there, but that lower bottom bracket puts you more in the bike, so you feel like you're less on top of the bike, which for a gravel road endurance focused bike is definitely a way to go. It could perhaps be a bit lower, but on the flip side, you get more ground clearance. So the downside of a really super low bottom bracket, as good as the handling performance is, there's a high risk of clipping pedals on roots and rocks when you're riding mountain bike trails. So it's a good move, could maybe have gone lower, but if you complain about ground clearance on a low bottom bracket bike, then this is a good approach. The comfort of the bike is pretty good for the most part. It's definitely a stiff, firm feeling bike, big oversized carbon fork and frame, and I'm leaning heavily on these 45mm WTB regular tyres at low pressures, 23 front, 26 back, that give a lot of comfort, and the bike is generally pretty smooth for the most part. It handles big impacts well, not too jarring when you hit a rock or a root or a pothole, and it deals with high frequency busts well, so corrugated trails, kind of grassy stuff or washboarded gravel, but definitely a firmer feeling bike and doesn't have the smoothness, the compliance of say a Specialized Diverge or that giant Revolt I had on review recently. So comfort isn't first class, but it's very, very good, and it does isolate you from, like I say, the bigger impacts, potholes and roots and rocks and other stuff. But it's definitely not an uncomfortable bike when you are encountering rough gravel. But I find it best on smoother gravel, well-maintained gravel, and backcountry lanes and smooth woodland trails like this one here. For like really technical off-road trails, there are more capable bikes like Specialized Diverge and that Salsa Warbird I've had with the RockShox suspension fork on test recently. So we've got a longer reach and then a shorter stem, so you get a good fit. It feels really comfortable, nice reach to the hoods and the drops, really comfortable position for long rides, fast rides on the gravel and on the road. And that longer reach with a slacker head angle puts the front wheel further out in front of you, and what it does, it gives you really good control when you're riding technical steep trails, because you're further behind that front wheel. Makes it easier to pilot the bike through tight corners, switchbacks, rocky berm sections, and much more enjoyable, and definitely pushes closer to mountain bikes in that regard compared to a cyclocross bike, which is nervous and twitchy when you are riding those very steep trails. That's a gravel bike does let you ride. So for riding long distance at high speed on road and gravel, this new V+1 is very, very capable. So as a package, it's very, very compelling. And then you get off, you stop and look back and admire the way it looks. The paint job, the color, and the understated graphics is a very, very appealing package. So let's wrap up the review, go through some equipment details, and give my verdict at the end of the video. This ultimate build really impresses, and there's nothing really I would change on the bike. Now, I've already done a review on the SRAM Explore gearing, link down below, but I think this new 1044 cassette works extremely well for gravel and all-road riding. You get nice smooth progression up the cassette. The first 6 sprockets are 1-tooth increments, then that 44 gives you plenty of range on the steeper climbs. This bike has a 44-tooth chainring, which really emphasises the speed of this bike on the road and smooth gravel. But it's a little bit big for steeper climbs or if you're riding with a bit of luggage on the bike. But Vielo will accommodate your requirements by speccing the chainring you need on your bike, or supplying you with multiple chainrings so you can tune the bike to different riding requirements. And then we have Zips 303S wheels that launched last year, and I've ridden these on multiple bikes now. And while their width is dwarfed by the 44mm wide Riddler tyres, they are still a fast wheel set, very fast on the road and gravel. You can easily smash along the road at 40k an hour on the bike. It has that sort of capability. And the tyres are a good choice as well. I've got these running really low pressures, 23 in the front and 26 in the back for my rider weight, which sounds alarmingly low, but it gives me plenty of comfort on rougher gravel, and it's still fast rolling on the road and hard packed trails with no noise from these tightly spaced blocks, and nice big shoulder lugs for getting over in the corners when it's a bit looser and slippery. So good tyre, good high speed, fit and forget tyre really for all but the muddiest trails where you might want a Resolute or something a bit chunkier. I'm really taken with the one-piece carbon handlebar and stem. I think it looks fantastic. And I like how the top is swept back to create a shorter reach. And I'm liking this fabric bar tape, very, very comfy. Okay, let's wrap up this review of the Vielo V+1 then. And what you're getting is basically a fat tired drop bar bike that's great on the road, on the gravel, and everything in between. The things I love about this bike are the way it looks. I love the colour, I love the understated branding. I think it's really refreshing in a marketplace of quite dull paint jobs that don't really inspire. But this one does inspire. I absolutely love it. Then there's the way it rides. The bigger tyre clearance and that revised geometry of the old bike gives the bike so much more capability and puts it into line with other really good gravel bikes in the market right now. So a real improvement that I really appreciate in the way gravel is riding, the way I'm really starting to embrace gravel more and more, and many of you are as well. The value for money, the price, that's hard to swallow, but if you can afford it, if you have deep pockets, well, you won't be disappointed. And I also really appreciate the fact it's a small company trying to be bold, ambitious, and stylish. Anyway, don't forget to check out 10 of the best gravel bikes available right now by checking the video up here. And don't forget to subscribe by hitting the button down here. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all again very soon.